Hello, everyone. Thank you and welcome. My name is Monica Gonzalez, and I'm part of the Women's Inspiration Network and the Social Marketing Impact Lead here at Citrix. So we're here and we're excited for you all to join us for the International Day of the Girl, a day where we focus on empowering and amplifying the voices of girls. Thank you for tuning in today. Today, our moderator is Liz Fuller, Vice President of Alliance Marketing Strategic Programs. In addition, she is also the co-host of Women on Work podcast. So I'll hand it over to her today. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you for joining us today. The Day of the Girl has been an annual moment of international recognition for over 10 years. In that time, the focus of this day, or this moment, has been to highlight the challenges girls face and to promote girls' empowerment and the fulfillment of their human rights. Today, I'm joined by several amazing women who are here to share their stories and to identify how to transform talk into action. Did you know that as I speak today, that 50% of women are offline, and that girls are 5 times less likely to pursue a career in technology than compared to boys? Not only is this creating a digital divide that widens year over year, but it has longer-term implications. By not empowering girls with access to technology or encouraging girls to pursue roles in STEM, a disservice is being done to our future. Empowering girls and women with education and technology is critical to enabling their children and their children's children to succeed. Enabling girls and women has demonstrated the power to end poverty, improve education achievement and attainment, create quality roles and jobs, and benefit overall well-being. I'm excited to be joined today by Helen Lam, Dr. Kilan Ashad-Bishop, and Susan Parrett. Thank you for joining us today. Let's start with you, Susan. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what drove you into your field of work.
Thanks, Liz, and thanks for having me here. So my name is Susan Parrett, and I'm a director at Upwork. At Upwork, I work with a globally distributed team where we support businesses who leverage the freelancers that are found on Upwork's work marketplace. We help Upwork's clients to design, scope, and execute their projects successfully using this independent talent. And I've been at Upwork for 4 years in January. And previously, I spent about 13 years in the legal staffing industry. So how I came to Upwork was a bit of a windy path. I practiced law for a few years, and then I transitioned over into legal staffing. And when I started in the legal staffing world, it coincided with the entry of cloud computing and the use of AI. And so over my decade that I spent there, I saw what used to take 300 people to review documents 6 months would take a quarter of the time with a quarter of the people. And how that was possible was due to technology-assisted review. And so when I had an opportunity to join Upwork, I wanted to take the technology advances that I'd seen on a small arena expanded to a much broader level. So Upwork's mission is to create economic opportunities so people can have better lives. And I've been fortunate enough to be part of a company that, for example, in 2020, the independent talent on the work marketplace around the globe earned over $2.3 billion. And so I love being a part of an organization that uses technology to make a difference in the world.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much, Susan. Now, Helen, same question for you.
Yeah, no, thank you, Liz. And yes, equally delighted to be here. My name's Helen Lam. I'm responsible for standardising our approach to delivery in Fujitsu, working across our international regions and with Japan. And I would love to say that I had this amazing career plan that I've then followed, but I literally just landed in IT as a graduate. I joined as a graduate quite a few years ago now. And I think what was useful for me actually by not having such a preconceived idea of what IT was all about was it meant I was very open-minded to what the opportunities were that could be created, and worked in a number of different business roles throughout my career, which has varied from delivery ownership to solution design to program management, and now global standardization. And I think the thing that is consistent for me is every day is different. So for me, it's an exciting place to be. It continues to change and evolve. And, you know, I feel very passionately about it from a female perspective because, you know, I really believe that, you know, number one, women should have the same opportunity. There shouldn't be any sort of gender barriers. But secondly, is just that this means a whole load of people are potentially missing out on being able to bring great things to the marketplace and the world at large.
Thank you, Helen. Kilan, are you able to? Oh, there you are. Hi, Kilan. Thank you. Same question for you.
Yes. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to repeat the question. I had technical difficulties.
Oh, no, I understand that. I did as well. Hopefully others didn't really notice. But my question was, you know, just tell us a little bit about yourself and, you know, what led you to your role.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So hi, my name is Dr. Kilan Bishop. I'm a biomedical scientist by training. That means that my science is the science of health. And that's actually pretty much what I've wanted to be since I was a kid. I knew that I wanted to be a scientist. I knew I liked math and science. And it really just came down to wanting to understand the world a little bit more, understand at a deeper level the things that I was experiencing. And here we are. So now my research, I started out in molecular cancer biology, which is in a lab doing mouse work. And at this point, I'm doing work that is almost entirely secondary analysis of data sets, but it's designed to understand the various ways that the things that we experience as people affect our health.
That's wonderful. So I know that you know, I'll keep going with you, Kilan. A question for you is more, you know, make me feel like what led you to that. I mean, those are very specialized areas of science. Science is a very wide range of opportunities. That's a very specialized focus. What inspired you to go into those directions?
Yeah, so I actually was a child who was really fascinated by the world, as I shared. I liked outside, and I had parents and a family who encouraged me to explore that. And so everyone, like, you know, when you're a child and you go outside and you come back and you're like, whoa, the dirt. Don't you bring those things into my house. I was just lucky enough to have the encouragement to explore. That exploration extended when I lost my grandfather to some health conditions that I didn't fully understand at the time, but I wanted to. And so in my head, it was like, okay, my grandpa got sick. I lost him. I want to make sure that if somebody else's family member gets sick, they have a chance of keeping them and keeping that connection. And so how can I make that happen? And it turned out that biomedical science was that path. And so I said biology because it was the study of living things, but then it went from there into very specialized biomedical science.
That's wonderful. Thank you very much. I mean, a great way to follow is just to, you know, be inspired in terms of the path and career you're looking for. So, Helen, I think, thank you for coming back on camera. I was there nervous.
I was actually having a little cough, so I just went off camera to do it politely.
Oh, no worries. Hope you're feeling all right.
Yeah.
You express some of your, you know, the passions that you have around, you know, what you're obviously the career and technology and having women go into this field. So what do you think are the biggest obstacles for women in technology? And maybe you can share some personal anecdotes about maybe some of your own personal obstacles.
Yeah, I think the first obstacle just starts off in terms of the preconceptions around technology. I think it can sound pretty daunting. You know, it's amazing if you can be super technical, but you don't have to be. I actually think personal skills are more important. An open mind, curiosity, a passion to make a difference are actually the things that start to get you going in having a career in technology. So I think breaking down that understanding and that, yes, it's like stuff that is quite technical and can be geeky, but why not get involved? You know, it's the opportunity is there for the making. So that's my first one, is just breaking down the preconceptions. And then I think the second point is it goes beyond gender. I really believe in parity for all. And there are without doubt social inhibitors which exist within the world today, and sadly have got worse during COVID times, which really is just heartbreaking because, you know, at the point in history where we should be moving forward, not going backwards. So I think there's also the second part to me is, how do we help people have the step up that they deserve, you know, the helping hand? And never assume that nobody needs it. I think most people need it one way or another, whether that's in terms of confidence, whether it's in terms of supporting social mobility, whether it's in terms of kind of like coaching, mentoring, whatever. And I wouldn't just limit it to, I don't limit it to women. I think it's just a general thing. How do we all help each other have the step up we deserve to be the best we can?
Regardless of gender, to your point, right? Regardless of how you identify or how you think as well, right? Because this extends to just anybody who's different. And I think that that's the idea, is to eliminate the differences and just embrace
the differences. Yeah,
embrace it. Absolutely.
Yes.
So that's wonderful. And one follow-up, I mean, personally, any obstacles that you've, you know, any anecdotes, or have you experienced all of those examples that you shared?
Well, I think actually, I fell into technology in a career in IT, but I think the biggest obstacle, without doubt, has been me. I mean, that's the thing. That's the reality of it, is that if I think about how many seconds, minutes, hours, days, weeks, and I suspect it goes into months and could even be years, where I've then been, you know, really nervous about whether I'm doing the right thing, whether I'm the right person for a role, what does everyone think, what should I do to maybe fit in. So if I go back to the start of my career, I was working in the city, based on the trading floor of financial institutions, you know, and I wore a suit with a shirt and cufflinks because I thought it was really important to like fit in and look like I belong. And you know, I'd never have dreamt there that now I'd be sat here however many years later in my lovely pinky sweatshirt that I adore, in my home, in my jeans and everything, just being able to kind of like chat about, you know, my own experiences and feeling confident enough to do it. And I think that's what's so important to me, is that it's okay to be braver than you might think. Give it a go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice to everyone at all ages, right? Be braver than you think you are. Yeah, I think that's that's wonderful. So, Susan, over to you. Quick question to you on, like, in terms of technology, and when do you first remember your experience in accessing technology?
It's funny, I was thinking about this weekend. I have a 10-year-old daughter, and her access to technology, I feel like, was from the womb.
Yeah,
I was thinking about when, you know, my kids' last questions, you know, did you have, you know, cell phones back when you were a kid? And it's like, no, didn't have cell phones. So I was trying to think of the first time I actually saw a computer, and I've told her brothers, and I remember when my brother got a Commodore 128, I had to ask him, I was like, when was that? It was 1986, so I am dating myself here, but I remember it had those really big floppy disks, and it had the dot matrix printer, and it did open a new world. We weren't online or anything at that point, but it opened worlds where, you know, I remember still to this day, my mother having me do typing classes on there or doing speed reading classes. And so it opened, you know, it became just the norm for me. And then where I'm thinking about where it really changed was my first real grown-up job that I had. I remember I had a boss he handed me a BlackBerry, a laptop, and then a tether. And he goes, okay, you can tether your BlackBerry to your laptop and go anywhere. And I was like, what does that mean? You know, I was used to like plugging it in and like the dial up. And so instead, I could just do that. And this is where I do count myself fortunate in my career path, is I've had, you know, mentors or, you know, at that point, my boss, who was like, take this, I don't care where you work, just go and, you know, get the job done. And that allowed me to move around. Wasn't limited to geography. I may or may not have worked like in an IKEA, you know, cafe, you know, those type of things. And so having that way back in the day of being able just to tether, it just gave me freedom to pursue opportunities that I would not have had otherwise.
So by becoming tethered, you become untethered.
I became untethered, and that's the thing, because I remember, I mean, even now, like what Helen just said, you know, we're sitting in our homes, and, you know, we never would have expected this. I'm not tethered to my desk anymore, right? I have the freedom. Now we have a little computer in our hands where we can go anywhere. And so giving that access in a proper way just to the next generation, I think it would be amazing to see where they go with that, where we've gone with just the, you know, much smaller access that we have.
So I'm going to stick with you, Susan, on that point, though. So what do you think organizations, or what have you seen organizations do to help empower or it may not be access to for girls to have technology, but even just empowering women as their own organizations?
So one of the things that, Upwork is obviously a global platform. And so one of the areas that I have seen personally with teams that I have worked with is it's a globally distributed team. And so, we don't collect data on the gender of freelancers on the platform, but there's some studies that we have shown that 76% of independent talent report that freelancing allows them to have the flexibility to be a caretaker. Now, we know that caretakers are disproportionately female, whether it be for your children or for relatives, but having the ability to have access to pick when you would like to work, when you are able to work, when it works for you. That is something that I have seen personally on, last week I spoke with somebody in Egypt who had just started a project where they were like, I have a new baby, I would like to be able to earn an income, but I'm not comfortable, at this point in time on going out. And they're able to have some flexibility to work that way. So I think being able to see that has been, you can see the beneficial impact. I think the other thing that, obviously the corporations that some of us represent, having an event like this, I am part of the Women's Employee Resource Group at Upwork. And here it was actually started by Hayden, who is our CEO before she was the CEO. And it was something that I have been able to, through the three pillars we have, which are career, culture, and community, I've been able to bring my authentic self to work because I'm able to have the conversations like we have now. But then I'm also provided with the resources to, we have panels, we have some fireside chats, we're able to connect to the community. And so we have volunteer opportunities to strengthen our ties. And so to me, that makes, companies are changing more than just their employees. They're changing, people that they work with outside of those circles.
Thanks, Susan. Same question for you, Kilan. I'm going to get heads up, Helen. Same questions coming over to you. So, Kilan.
Yeah. So essentially, I think you made a great point about, yes, we have to empower girls, but we also have to keep that same energy as they work their way through education and the workforce and become women and beyond just the gender identity, all that they desire to be in the world. I'm the co-founder of an effort called STEMNoire, and the entire premise of STEMNoire is that we invest in the women. We invest in Black women in science, technology, engineering, and math, who are already navigating and charting very often very unfamiliar territories. Right, Black women are extremely underrepresented in the scientific workforce, and that comes from being underrepresented in STEM education. And so there are challenges that, even though we all have very different backgrounds that we face, and sometimes those are just resources. Things like technology that are easy investments, but access is taken for granted. And so I think that the easiest thing that you can do is not make assumptions about what someone has or does not have. It's about asking what they need, what kind of support they need, and then doing what you can to bridge that gap between what they have and what they need to be successful. And even in a group like STEMNoire that caters to what some people consider a monolithic population, right? Black women, they must all be the same. The answer for what people need really, really varies and really, really changes. So it's just being mindful of the diversity of needs.
Thank you, Kilan. Absolutely. I think that's a great point that you're talking about. It's not a matter of just giving them access to technology. It's education. It's so many different areas. I mean, it's even health, right? Even just healthcare. I think that's an incredible point that you're making, that it does empower, moves everywhere can help the same thing, right? So Helen, over to you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And that's one of the points you made I thought was really spot on, actually. There's a massive risk that we just end up doing these groupings, that actually we find a solution for a group. And then if you then add in the fact it's on a PowerPoint slide and we think we've done an amazing job, or we've got some sort of key performance indicator, so how good are we? But I think that's completely missing the point. I think it's exactly as you're saying, that it has to be something that is accessible. It has to be something that's real, and has to be something that's meaningful at an individual level. And I think that I really kind of believe that the more that that can be enabled, the more goodness that then comes through, because the knock-on flow of change agents that we have in the world increases. So it's kind of like the butterfly effect that we're looking at from a equality perspective. And a lot of that comes about through sharing stories, being open about what we're experiencing. Within Fujitsu, one of the things that was initiated probably about 2 years ago now was linked to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, where effectively it's almost like a community for each one, and that people then choose which one or multiple ones that they want to sign up to, and they're then connected into that as a community. And one of the many reasons I love that is it breaks down the geographic barriers. There are no barriers in terms of, you know, preconceptions around anyone in that group, because you're just part of that group and that community. And then what's really powerful is it's people within that community who are then putting forward ideas, solutions and support to each other. So it actually in itself becomes sustainable and self-developing and self-evolving. And I think the more we can kind of connect across that, not just within an organisation, but across organisations and society at a whole, then the better, the greater that butterfly effect becomes.
Yeah, it absolutely is a butterfly effect, as you point out, right? It creates that ripple. I mean, there are so many studies that show by empowering women, you empower their children, and those children are empowered, right? It is a matter of small acts can have big impacts. So
yeah.
So continuing on with you, Helen, I mean, similar, you know, addressing this problem, in your opinion, how do you think technology can become more accessible? How can we minimize that gap between the genders?
Yes, so I think that one of the key points I think is actually that sometimes it becomes easier for us to share the challenges and the ideas with the, if you like, the converted, the reformed, the people who don't even need reforming, who already had a good understanding. So I think that you absolutely then need champions for change. And some of those champions can be people that other people can relate to. But they also need to be people who, if I describe it as buck the trend, in terms of it's almost like the unexpected becomes then the ones who can then sometimes bring the greater level of change, because they're then tapping into different groups across society. So I really believe that when we're talking about, you know, International Women's Day, or in terms of like supporting daughters, nieces, sisters, etc., granddaughters, in terms of their future, then the more that you know, it's not just the women talking about it, but the guys as well, then the better. Because actually, you know, it takes away any sort of like gender bias around it. It's just something that you talk about with your children. It's just something that you encourage your children to then be part of and do.
Well, to your point, sisters, daughters, granddaughters, men can have them too. So, you know, why is it just a woman's concern to have? And so, Susan, I mean, I'll raise the question to you similarly. I mean, what do you think? Those are great points that Helen's raised, but what do you think about how can we decrease the divide? You know, reduce the gap.
So I was talking to somebody last week, and they said something I found pretty profound, where they said, girls can't be what they can't see. And it hit me. I don't know about all of you, but we were home for, I don't know, it was a year and a half. I felt like 10 years of school was homeschooled in our living room. And as much as all of that, there was a lot of annoying parts. The one positive that came out of that, I thought was interesting. And my daughter saw me work every day. And frankly, she heard a lot of my colleagues work every day. And she may or may not have, you know, heard like, you know, meetings. And so one thing that I think is interesting is ensuring representation at the leadership level. And where I saw this on a personal level was my daughter and her friend were playing, and I was like, what are you guys doing? And she's like, oh, we're pretending we're our moms. And she literally was standing there at my standing desk being like, so da 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 da, and like pretending to do a presentation. And then her friend's mom is a doctor, and she was pretending to, you know, do doctor stuff. And I was like, wow, that's something that I hadn't even thought about as a positive, being that she got to see what I do versus just, hear what I do. And so I think that we need to make sure that girls can see what they can be by having, obviously, representation at a leadership level. I also think that what many companies are doing, where they're supporting the future generation, and it's boys and girls in general, with things like the free coding classes, or, I know specific to girls, the Girls Who Code, right? Or even reading those books, or incorporating them into just, this is the norm. It isn't that, okay, this is the route that, boys will take and girls will take. It's anybody can take whatever route they would like, and we're going to support you with how you can do this by, breaking down the barriers, whether it be at home and supporting kids or nieces or nephews or whatever. But then also just companies, I think they need to make sure that when they're hiring, that they are looking at the transferable skills, right? Back in the day, it was you had to have a college degree and you had to do this and you had to do that. Let's look at what the transferable skills are. Is there something where, caretaking, that's project management. You're project managing all day long, caretaking. Let's apply that into what can be done in a business. The same, just that ensuring remote schedules, that people have flexibility, they can work remotely, they can work when they need to. And I think that's where you'll start to see a bit of a change.
I love that. I love those concepts. I mean, they seem pretty simple, that, removing the genders, hopefully eventually, from the process, and just saying, here's what we're doing, making it more accessible. And yeah, I agree. There's just a lot of good points coming out. So Kilan, what would, from your perspective and from STEMNoire, what have what opportunities do you see in terms of technology?
Yeah, so I actually love Susan's point about getting people to think about their expertise in a way that, makes their lived experience an asset. And that's a lot of what we focus on. It's the fact that when we talk about the things that we value and want to learn, we very often take a deficit lens to the experiences of women and underrepresented minorities, so that we feel like we have all of this ground to make up. We just don't know how to do anything, and we are fighting our way to the front of the line. And that is very often not the case. Very often we have every skill that would be listed in a job description and every transferable skill that we need. It's just about switching the mode of application. And so I think that the most important thing that we can do is, outside of providing resources, make sure that people understand all that they are already bringing to the table, so that those resources are actually what take them from maybe the middle of the line, but I'm gonna say they're in the front, to the front, or even further in the lead. And like I said, I think the most powerful thing is we make a lot of assumptions about what people have or don't have based on, identities, right? But my experience as a Black woman is going to be different than somebody who comes from a rural environment, or somebody who, comes from a first generation family. And so outside of that provision of the basic resources, those things that will provide us all with the same starting line, I think we just need to be mindful of the constant support and sometimes affirmation that people need, to let them know you are not in the back of the line. You have the skills that you need. And so we're just going to switch the mode of application and make sure that there's room for who you are in the work that you're doing.
I love that. I mean, that's definitely a way that all of us, even those on our panel, need to be thinking about more about what we do in our daily lives and how it applies to our work and as a skill. I mean, I know as a woman, how many times have you not approached or pursued a role because you didn't feel quite right or quite ready for it, and yet that the people that did pursue it, at least not to generalize, go after it when they're not really ready. Right, but we hold ourselves back from opportunities, and it is definitely a mindset of us not being able to translate what skills we have into how that fits into those criteria or different value sets. I mean, that's a really great way to translate, to your point, how caregiving can translate and allow people to take a step into a different career. And I love the idea of being able to really allow women to choose their own schedules as well, because I think that is very limiting, especially as a result of a pandemic. People have left the workforce because they haven't had those choices or those flexibilities, and to be able to provide them the skills to say, I'm available between these hours, I can do a job now, it allows them to be empowered because they can do something in other ways that they may have felt previously closed off to. So I guess throwing off some curveball questions to the panel. So I'll start with you, Kilan. I know you've touched on this a bit, and I think your organization, especially talking about how it's not one size fits all. I feel like you have a lot of insight into this. But have you, have you ever personally felt like you've been put into a box career-wise? And and similarly, what would you maybe say to someone who's in a similar situation, like how to get over that? Because I feel like we all allow ourselves to be put in a box, or have been put in a box even against our will. So how do we, give people the tools to get out of it with the learnings that we've had?
So I think it starts within, right? And it's a super cliche answer, but it's that asset framing and that asset mindset where you're going, these are the skills that I have that nobody else here has, right? Or very few people have. And these are actually the things that make me stand out. And then it starts, with the communication of that. I haven't done X, but I have done Y, and it's very similar. So I'm going to give it a try. I think that there's a lot of opportunities that we pass up as women to show off. Yeah. And we should show off more because it's in those moments.
Point. I'm sorry, Kilan, that's a great point. Do you feel that sometimes we hold ourselves back because we don't want to show off, because we're conditioned to be humble?
Absolutely. So I'm a postdoc, right? I'm a postdoc. I'm in academia, and there is a very specific set of things that they want you to do as a postdoc. I do those things and a few more that feed the ways that I want to develop. And I think that we all have to, have that level of intention where we go, okay, this is where I am, and this is what you can do for me. And I want to develop in all of these ways that you want me to, but I'm also really interested in this, and I want to do this, and I'm going to do this. I'm not asking you for permission. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And these are the ways in which by, developing my interests and my talents, that it may ultimately serve you, but it's also beyond you. Because this is a job, you are, a small piece of what is a much larger life. Especially, and it's new, right? Like we talk about like women in the workforce as if there was not a time where we couldn't work. And like in my lifetime, women have been able to work, but like there was a time not so long ago, I have ancestors who are still alive whom were very much at home, very much had the first kind of call center jobs that we were really allowed to hold. And so I think that sometimes we have a meekness in the workplace. We have a professional meekness where we still feel like we're, trying to carve out what role we want to hold in the workplace and in the workforce. We want to carve out new systems that feed our existence a little bit more, but that's hard because institutions tend to be very, very rigid. But, those are all of the ways that we can transform workplaces for the better. They are the reason that there should be more of us. We have insight and skills that can make things better for everyone, not just other women.
No, and that's great. And it's not just about being in the workforce, it's being where we're placed in the workforce too, right? Putting us into more leadership roles. So Susan, same question, about have you ever felt positioned into a box, and then what would you say to others to help crawl, chew your way out?
You ever have those moments in your life where like you have a defining moment, or it's not defining, but something happens and it's really tiny, but like you remember it forever? I have one of those, and it's not super techy, but it is a moment where it was my first job out of law school. And I remember going to the judge's chambers. We were going to, I don't even know what we were going to do, but I just remember we were sitting out there and it was all men and I was the only female there. And there was a male court reporter. And traditionally, it seems court reporters are female. And this man literally had his machine in front of him sitting there. So we're all sitting there and we come out, and I believe it was the secretary, the judge was like, okay, ma'am, you can come in with your stuff. And I'm like, what? And she's like, you're the court reporter. And I remember being like, no, the dude with the big old thing in front of him is the court reporter. I'm the attorney. And I just remember that feeling of just, wow, like this, this is the 2000s. This should not be happening this way. And so I will say I've taken that where I try not to either way, right? Assume whether male, female, whichever would be the court reporter. But that's taken it for me where I've harnessed that of making sure that I can be truly who I am. I'm not going to say that I do it all the time, right? I think it's really important. Something Kilan had said about saying, this is the task that I'm going to do because I need to, but then here's what I would like to work on. And, here's what I'm going to work on as well. Maybe that's more your passion project or something it truly makes you happy when you go to work and it's benefiting your organization. It's also benefiting you. It's benefiting the world at large because butterfly effect, everybody's happy. I think it's also important though to surround yourself by people that support you, right? People that you can have those conversations with where you can be vulnerable and you can say, I would like to do this. Here's what I'm thinking. And they might call you on it. They might be like, yeah, no, that's not like, or they might be like, that's a really good idea. Or they can, just supporting you in what you're hoping to do. I think that's really important to making sure you don't stay in that box and you have the ability to get out and kind of spread your wings where you want to.
And here's another question for you in terms of that moment where that you were, misidentified. Did you feel in that moment that you almost needed to apologize more than the person who mistook you? Yeah, I feel like we're always put in situations where we apologize for misunderstandings that are not even our own misunderstandings and whole thing. So, you guys are taking all of my good answers for my next question, but over to you, Helen.
Yeah, I can relate to all the stories. And I've had those moments where, I was told once that, I went for an interview and the guy who was interviewing me, he looked at my CV and he said, "Who are you, Wonder Woman?" And I'm like, well, unfortunately, I didn't think of a quick enough answer at the time, so I should have just said yes, but I didn't. And same sort of thing where I'm kind of like, then suddenly trying to justify what I've done and everything, rather than, would that have happened if it had been a guy in the room? Would he have been called Superman? I don't know. So I think there are moments like that. And I was also reflecting over something you were saying earlier, because I was thinking, in the context of International Day of the Girl, how do we then turn it round to the girls in our lives and equip them with our experiences and learnings? And I was thinking that, the more we can help them understand what their transferable skills are in a way that, if one of them's like, stood singing a song in the kitchen, well, it's kind of like, well, look at you, you'd be amazing to present to a group of people when you're older. So it's almost then kind of like doing more of a natural linkage, I think, between, what's happening on a day-to-day basis, but the potential of what that can become. So I've just thought of that listening to you three. So thank you for inspiring me on that. I think that's something I'm going to take away from today.
Well, so I'm going to go to you, Helen, but I'm going to give you a chance to answer this question because I'm going to start by answering my own questions. But like I said, all of you have taken my answers as I've gone along. So best of luck as I vamp for a bit. But the next question I have is really about, what would you even say to your younger self? I think you've all been vulnerable and you've shared your conversations and maybe encounters when you were younger. But, in terms of if you were able to time travel and able to go back and say to your younger self, hey, one thing, what would that one thing be? And something that's already been covered quite a bit. And, there's so many good words of advice that have come out in this conversation, but I would say vulnerability is my number one. Be vulnerable. If that's something that's hard to be in the workforce, it's hard to show emotions when emotions sometimes, depending on gender, are perceived differently, right? There are those different columns. If you're, a man, you're aggressive. If you're a woman, well, that's not this type of webinar. So, but I think the idea is that, there are comparisons and disparities, right? When it comes to how they compare the same level of emotions, the same level of energy. And it is important to find others and to be vulnerable and to also at the same time in that vulnerability, be willing to know that you know your stuff, right? That's a level of vulnerability as well, because you have to own it and you have to carry it, and that in itself can be sometimes hard to do. So with that, I'm going to go over to you, Helen. Same question. What would you tell younger Helen?
No, thank you, Liz. I'm loving your advice. I think it's really good. I could have done with that. Probably still could sometimes.
Yeah, it's not just for girls, it's for women too. Everyone.
Yeah. So I think my advice would be a little bit what I talked about earlier. That be bolder than you think you probably should be, and braver than you maybe feel that you are. And the extra one that I just attach with that is enjoy the journey. You know, I really believe that life is short, and sometimes, you know, from a career point of view, everything's, you know, described in a way that's almost like destination. And actually, the journey itself is just so meaningful. And in fact, you know, that's what makes us who we are all our different journeys that we've been experiencing. So enjoy it. And if you do, then chances are you'll help other people.
Oh, that's great. So Susan, same question for you.
It's funny. I think we oftentimes what we might tell our younger self, we still may need to tell our slightly older self. It ties a lot to what Helen said. So perhaps it is a common thread amongst all of us. So honestly, just don't let others define who you can be, because I think that it's very easy to fall into what I believe Kilan had said earlier, where it's like, okay, well, we're good at this skill, but we're not going to brag about it, or we're not going to kind of shout from the rooftops what we can. And so in a way, we let others define us, because we're keeping ourselves kind of quieter of like, well, you know, I don't know if I'm that good at it, so I'm not going to say anything about it. So taking that, basically like, it's okay. You don't have to like kind of hide your light. You can just go and do it. And something that I think maturity has shown to me over the years is everybody is frankly more focused on themselves than they are on you. And so when you go out there and you feel like, oh my gosh, everybody's going to be like, what's going on? Like, they're all thinking the same thing about themselves. And so really, like, get maybe one or two people that be like, whoa, but like really in the grand scheme of things, it's okay. And you will be better off in the long run.
I completely agree. And there's a great quote from a one of my favorite TV shows. I'm not going to say the name because that, again, is not the wrong kind of webinar, but where they say, nobody cares, David. And it's true. Everyone's got their own world. Everyone's got their own thing going on. Apparently, in some cases, they want to do DJs, you know, and I let them be. But nobody's overthinking your life as much as you are, right? They've got their own life to overthink, their own vulnerabilities to try to hide. So no, absolutely. You know, I think that's a great way of, because I think especially women, or I don't want to just say women, a lot of people have that tendency to just overthink, or, you know, when you're driving home, when we used to leave our homes, you know, you would overthink, oh, I shouldn't have said it that way, or how did I come across, or what are they thinking? Oh, next time I see that person, you know, did I sound like I didn't know what I was talking about? Did I sound is my tone too off? Imposter syndrome flaring at an all-time high, right? So yeah, absolutely. I think it's always good to remember that everyone else has their own levels of imposter syndrome going, so nobody cares as much as you do. That's great. So Kilan, over to you.
So I think the most poignant piece of advice I could give my younger self is like, do not choose. I think there were parts of me that felt like, you know, I either had to go like straight through school or I would have never got my PhD. Like, I did not have to choose to go straight through. There was definitely another path. I could have stopped. I could have worked. I could have taken a gap year. There were options. I'm an equity-oriented scientist, so there have been parallel ways in which I had to develop as a scientist and as an advocate, as someone who very much wanted to bring identity and community into my work. And there was for a long time a contingent of folks who were like, nope. And like everybody gets it now. Everyone gets it now, because like equity in science is like a big in tech, it's like a big deal now. But especially when I was starting school in undergrad, still trying to figure out like who I was, and I had this very rough idea of what I wanted to be. There were just a lot of people who wanted me to carve it down. And like, I just really wish I could have told my younger self, hey, like keep it big, and do the things that will, you know, in parallel bring you to this ultimate goal. I started doing that a little bit later, and you know, I'm happy with where I am now. But there were definitely, I think, some false choices presented, and so I would tell my younger self to reject those Everybody, same way, everybody is overthinking. Everybody is trying to do something that's slightly different, but we want familiarity as human beings. And so you set one goal, somebody's going to try to bring it back to something that they understand.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. But sometimes you might be talking to the wrong person, the person who can't quite conceptualize where you're going. And so the answer is not to shrink. The answer is to go talk to somebody else sometimes. And so I think that's just something to keep top of mind as girls are developing and continuing to break the mold of what the world is telling them they can be.
That's a great point on the choose aspect, because I'm sure that we are so many things more than what we introduced ourselves to be today, right? In addition to what we did allow ourselves to be called out. And I love the idea of, really just letting people not, don't limit me, don't tell me what I can and cannot do. And I love the idea, and I'm in marketing, so maybe I was leaning, it's really knowing your audience, to your point, Kilan, right? Is more, who am I talking to? What's important to them? How do I need to speak to them? So that I can, what's important to them in particular, right? Yeah, so, just a few more thoughts before we wrap up. So Kilan, I'll stick with you. I mean, so STEMNoire, tell me a little bit more about STEMNoire in terms of what types of programs you're offering. As Susan mentioned, representation matters, right? And so obviously those are some great programs we want to bring some visibility to. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. So STEMNoire was originally conceptualized as a research conference and holistic wellness retreat for Black women in science, technology, engineering, and math, acknowledging that underrepresentation is a psychosocial factor as well. Like, we are going through, and career-wise, things are challenging, but there are also some significant mental health challenges that are posed by virtue of being the only or one of the few. And so we wanted to, bring a little bit more intention to a space where folks could bring voice to that, be honest about the effect that it's having on them, and be honest about the support they need to come to a healthier space. Well, when the pandemic happened, we actually had to pivot a lot because we wanted to have an in-person event, and we were in-house. And so we did virtual programming for over a year and a half, just literally creating Wellness Wednesday spaces, conversations that folks didn't really feel like they had space to have at their institution or sometimes among their family and friends. We've hosted the inaugural Black Women in STEM Week last year, where we literally just did paint and sip. We networked amongst ourselves in all of the different fields that encompass STEM. We talked and we fellowshiped and we networked, and that led to the inaugural STEMNoire conference, which was held in June of this year. We convened 600 women across 10 countries for 3 days of nothing but, honestly, there was fun. We had over 70 Black women as speakers that we were able to compensate because of our extremely generous corporate sponsors. We had over 40 research presentations of folks sharing the work that they're doing and the directions that they want to go. And so linking up with potential bosses or collaborators. And so I'm just really, really proud of the STEMNoire team. And there's 10 of us on the inaugural team that, brought what was very much an idea between Celeste, my co-founder, and I, all the way to life, to something that's able to serve at this point thousands of women.
Well, that sounds wonderful. I know we'd love to promote that link to your organization to the listeners and to our own internal audiences. So Helen, why don't you tell me a little bit about the programs that you're doing at Fujitsu in terms of empowering women or girls?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So it's really interesting as I look across the Fujitsu organisation, because we're a global organisation, and some of our locations, if you just did it on stats, that in terms of women in roles, if you look in our Philippines location, for example, we're at 50-50 in pretty much every role. To the point where Arlene, who leads the Philippines, I think at one point she was almost kind of like too top heavy if you're kind of like doing it as a split in terms of women in leadership roles versus the guys. So quite interesting. Then you switch it around to some of the other locations, and I think in terms we've got programs in terms of then how do we then make sure that the role descriptions that we do are gender neutral. how do we then do our screening in a way that is then gender neutral? How do we then do encouragement of, we have distinguished engineers, and we then have role models and special mentoring and coaching programs to encourage women to feel more confident to apply and be supported. So to me, there's like lots of different individual programs that are underway, but the bit that then I think then starts to go a step further is where it expands into the community. And the work that we then do with schools, I think, is really, really empowering. Again, it goes back to general equality, not just from a female perspective, but it does definitely make a difference from a International Day of the Girl perspective, because the more that we can feel those girls, enable those girls to feel empowered and able to have a future career and to feel that they have a rightful place to do so, then the more impactful that is. So, there's various things that we then do around, I've gone into schools in India and taught some lessons, which I've got to say was absolutely terrifying. Any tough day I have in the office is nothing compared to that one, I can tell you. 50 children between the ages of 5 and 9. But it absolutely, that's what's real. And that's what then makes a difference. Of trying to just break down those barriers between, what's kind of then seen as, workplace, and maybe people don't feel that it's the right thing for them or not in their league, and actually trying to make it much more accessible.
Oh, wonderful, Helen. And if you have any links that you'd like to promote afterward, please, we'll definitely highlight those in the follow-up. So Susan, wrapping it up before my wrap up, tell us about what Upwork's doing.
So I briefly mentioned, the employee resource groups, and so I look at it. We have ones that encompass, more than just females. So I think, but for International Day of the Girl, obviously thinking about the specific women's group. Excuse me. So internally, where I have seen what Upwork's been able to do is what I spoke about was like with careers, where we're able to have shared resources, have career initiatives which help advancement both within the company and, as perhaps people transition over to other companies, supporting them in that growth and where you would like to get in your career. We do other things internally where, Women's History Month is in March. And so we did we spotlighted both inside and outside of Upwork. We spotted women that were, you or I type thing could be, spotlighted, which was, to me, I really enjoyed getting to know people both within and without of Upwork that weren't necessarily just, the typical kind of famous women that you would know, to get to find out what they've done, what barriers they've accomplished. And then the other thing, which I actually was able to be a part of, is the Upwork Foundation. And so the Upwork Foundation, they have an initiative for a program that's designed to create inclusive economic opportunities so people have better lives. Now, COVID-19 obviously threw a wrench into all of this and to the economic inequalities that are rooted in systematic injustice. And so what we were able to do is put grants forth for nonprofit organizations that were specifically creating economic opportunities for those who are most impacted. And many of those did include women and girls, and being able to see that money is going from the organization, from Upwork to these nonprofit organizations, and seeing it applied in tangible ways, whether it's getting, computers so then people can be trained on how to, do coding, and then that leads them to their next job, which gets them out of the place that they were living in, and seeing that through has been very inspiring to see.
Yeah, upskilling is another great way of getting people to do different things and getting introduced to technology. So thank you, Susan. And thank you all for joining us on this conversation. I appreciate the three of you being willing to be open, share your stories and your thoughts and your experiences. So thank you all for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for joining us. And just so you know, today's conversation is just one of many taking place today that have taken place already and that is still very much needed to take place in the future. We encourage you to take what you've learned and heard today to consider how we can change the future and empower girls to have better access to technology. And in return, we can ask them to save the world. Thank you.